what we're going to be looking at through existing functionality. So we've got as far as those group access rights. So that allows you to adopt a more targeted approach to who you let in, what groups you let in, what groups you don't let in at a particular time. So we're going to have a little look at that. And we're going to look, going away from functionality that restricts opening directly. We'll be taking a look at digital signage that you might be able to use just to help inform your library visitors as to what you are doing and what you are trying to implement. And we're going to look at Sentry reports, not to forget the Sentry reports that can help you analyze how many people are coming in and whether any approaches that you're adopting are actually working. So the first of those then is maximum occupancy. And in fact, from the comments that people have already made, this is perhaps, whilst extremely simple, this might be one of the ones that is most relevant to you. So there are a variety of systems that people have in terms of Sentry configuration, and there are really three main types. Some of you are what we call in-only. So you're all using your card, I think, to get in. Some of you have free exit, or certainly exit without using your card. So those systems we call in-only, and because we're not monitoring who's leaving, we don't know how long people are staying for. We don't know what the occupancy is. So in the case of an in-only system, this unfortunately is not something you can immediately implement. We have two other modes of systems. There are those that are using their cards to leave as well, and those we absolutely do monitor the occupancy for, and you can use this function. And we also have a bit of a hybrid system where whilst you don't use your card to leave, we do monitor bodies, if you like, leaving. We do count people leaving, and that means we can monitor occupancy, and therefore this is available to you as well. There are very few sites. I think Leeds have a site, and I know Surrey have a site that are using this option. And if you are in only, if you do have free exit, then it certainly might be easily possible to apply some simple sensor technology to your exit that will allow us to start recording quantities of people leaving, which will allow us to monitor your occupancy, which will allow us to include this maximum occupancy function. So that might be worth having a chat to your account manager about. In any case, maximum occupancy is applied per zone. Those of you that have more than one zone, you can apply a different maximum occupancy to each zone. And it does what it says. It works as it would do normally up until that threshold. And as soon, in this example, 300 people, as soon as 300 people are in the building, then in fact no more people are allowed through. And if you have a graphic display, then the tile here is saying library full. That's exactly what it will say. And it is real-time responsive. So the moment that one person leaves and the occupancy goes down to 299, then that tile will change back to scan card, and one more person will be allowed through. So it's fully responsive. There's no lag on that. Basically, you'll see someone leave and be able to get in. So thoughts, comments, questions really on that?
Okay. Oh, Andrew.
Thanks, thanks, Daisy. So in terms of our layout at York, then, where we've got 3 turnstiles coming in, 2 turnstiles coming out, how does that work? Would we then go down to 1 turnstile coming in and 1 turnstile coming out in order to manage that, on the basis that 3 people could come? I don't know, try to come in at once. I'm just trying to work that out. I'm just trying to work that out in my mind.
It would I don't know, Pascalis has a comment on on the exact timing of how that works. If you do get up to 300 and one person leaves, and you have free entry turnstiles and people standing there, I must admit I'm not entirely sure whether there's a risk that people get in, because the entry transaction has a duration, it has a length, doesn't it? There's the moment the card is scanned and the turnstile's released. But at that point, the person hasn't gone through, and the occupancy is still 299. And does that mean that that another person could potentially scan a card and be accepted? We would have to check the code on that. The risk obviously applies simply until someone goes through the turnstile, and at that point, nobody else can get through. There's a risk that it would perhaps go to 301, 302 in your case, Andrew.
No, Kevin.
Does that not happen?
No, even though three card swipes seem simultaneous, they're never simultaneous. There's always a sequence they're being processed in. So the first one will get in, and the other two will not be allowed in.
Okay, brilliant.
And Narayan?
Yeah, hiya. Hi. We don't have the people don't have to scan to leave the library. It's a free exit. However, we do have a counter which is linked to the alarm viewer on the kiosk. Can that be in some way used to control this?
If I may, Narayan, just describe your exit lane to everybody else here. So we have a single exit lane, and you walk through book security, and you pass a beam breaker, I think, which detects that you're leaving, and that opens a pass gate for you. We would have to add just a little bit of additional hardware. I think we'd need to add something to the beam breaker, just because at the moment we're not logging that exit. We're simply using the beam breaker to open the gate. So we just need to add a little bit of hardware, change your system to in-out.
I thought that recorded how many people exited in the kiosk.
So I think Narayan, I think you're talking about the people counter on the security gates.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think we'd be able to use that data to, or it's not necessarily available on a sort of a real-time live basis to be added into Juno. That they're obviously two separate systems for the entry data that you're getting through Juno, and then the exit data that you're getting through your security system. But as Kevin was, I think his thought process was that we would be able to use the beam breaker with some additional hardware to make a decision on how many people have exited using that beam breaker.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question on the chat from James Gary. I think it sort of touches on what you were saying, Kevin, about a beam breaker. It's about having a sensor that opens the gates. And I think you were touching on an additional bit of hardware, perhaps, was it?
Yeah, James, you've got exactly the same arrangement as Narayan. So exactly the same. The beam breaker at the moment doesn't record any events. It simply operates the pass gate. So we just have to add a TACIM that beam breaker would integrate with, and we can get that TACIM feeding into Juno so that you can start recording occupancy. That's obviously just in your South Kensington site.
Okay, Tracy?
Hi, Tracy.
Oh, hello. Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm from Middlesbrough College, for people who don't know, and one end of our library it's got a bi-directional lane control, but we always use it, the staff always use it to go in and out because the toilets are very close by. So is there any way we could actually take ourselves out of that maximum occupancy? Because otherwise we might go up the loo and then not be able to get back in.
So a sort of staff override. Scarlett, are you able
That still work?
to comment on that? I don't know of any current way of kind of distinguishing between
Okay.
entries for
Well,
staff might be able to-
No, the occupancy doesn't distinguish on who you are. You know, it's one number. And if we want to do something like that, then the occupancy will not be realistic.
Yeah.
We can work something out to compute the student occupancy and the staff occupancy, but it would be something that we need to develop as an extra.
We do have one of those override buttons, so would that still work?
That will still work, but that will affect the occupancy.
Yeah, I think it would only just be for the sort of the library staff.
Yeah, exactly. So what you may need to do in that case is sort of set your occupancy as for a figure that you know less your library staff, and then just accept that obviously when a member of staff is in the toilet, you might not be 100% accurate, because that override button doesn't actually feed into the statistics within Juno. So you say instead of having a 300 occupancy, you'd set it to 295 if you had 5 staff members, for instance.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
The override button does override the software controls such as maximum occupancy. So, for example, if a member of staff is stuck outside the library because the maximum occupancy has been reached, then it could be buzzed through. That remains possible.
Okay, what, Tom?
Oh, hello. Yeah,
Hi, Tom.
my question, it's Tom Castell at Sheffield Hallam University. My question is related to the suggestion about adding in the extra tack-in whereby we don't have exit turnstiles. How practical would that be to do quickly, and how much would it be likely to cost?
So
It's your customer. Do you know the layout?
Yeah, I guess, Tom, you're talking about
is
for collegiate.
Yeah, that's right, because we've got entry turnstiles there, but no exit. So short of having a member of security staff manually set people to out, which would take a really long time and probably cause a queue, which could, I guess, present difficulties with social distancing. What I'm thinking about, could we literally just stick a little, and when I say pedestal, I don't mean a pedestal in terms of a turnstile, but a stick with a reader on the top of it. Is that something that could be put in place quickly?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of being able to install something fairly quickly, obviously it's all relative. We should be able to install a solution pretty quickly, obviously depending on whether your building's open and your estate's involvement and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so just thinking, I'm trying to picture the layout. So an option would be for an IR sensor to be fitted to the ceiling there. That would be an option, or to have a beam break similar to what we were just talking about a moment ago, that then links to a tack-in that could potentially be placed in the reception desk. So
I think I might have misunderstood, because I was thinking I was also trying to do something else at once, which is never a good idea. But I think I was understanding that people would be holding their smart card against it in order to get out of the building, even though there isn't actually a turnstile. Was that not the intention?
Not for the sites where at the moment it's essentially an anonymous exit. So the exit doesn't know who it is that's leaving. It would just be a case of somebody passing through a sensor, and the sensor seeing that someone has gone through, and therefore working out that one person has exited, and therefore deducting that one person from the maximum occupancy.
No, fair enough. That's actually a better solution than I'd assumed it would be. So in terms of, I should say, we're not in a position yet where, as far as I know, as far as I've been privy to, we're considering opening back up again. I'm more just thinking for when we do, how we approach that, and whether we can use both libraries or just one or whatever. But in terms of likely cost, is that something you're able to speculate on, or would you need to go away and find out more?
Probably to be safe, I'd prefer to go away and just check the figures. I don't want to give it something widely out, but I would say for that particular sort of scenario, if you like, that I've just described, I would say somewhere around £2,000 for a single sort of exit solution for that sort of thing.
Right. Okay. Hopefully,
wouldn't be too wildly sort of out there.
No, it's helpful to just have a rough estimate of a figure. Thank you.
No problem.
Cheers, Barney.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, we've got no questions at the moment. If you guys wanted to carry on.
Great, yeah, we probably should. Just to finish off, in general, if you are in only, then your options, short of putting in a turnstile to leave with a card reader, then your options are, if your lane is narrow, then a beam breaker would be appropriate or could be appropriate. It doesn't work where the lane is wide because it can't distinguish people side by side. But a beam breaker is a nice simple solution if you have a restricted exit. The alternative, as Barney said, is to put a sensor up in the ceiling that points down and uses software to work out, and infrared to work out people coming backwards and forwards. Obviously, your ceiling shouldn't be too high, shouldn't be exorbitantly high. Your corridor width could be quite wide, and we just put up multiple sensors. It would cost more, but we just put up multiple sensors and they would work together. So you wouldn't be double counting anybody in the middle or missing anybody in the middle, that sort of thing. So they're your main anonymous exit options. Okay. So lane control is of a similar vein, even a more direct vein really, because you can simply go into system settings and turn a turnstile off. You do it through an out of service parameter in the entrance record, and it works instantly. And of course, you go back in and turn it off to put it back onto card control. So this is obviously going to be usable to limit the capacity of the system. It could be used if you have multiple turnstiles, for example. If you do have multiple turnstiles and they're all in a row, as they typically would be, then two of those turnstiles next to each other will be within a 2 meter distance. So you might choose, for example, you've got 3 entry turnstiles, you might choose to take the middle one out of service in order to maintain a 2 meter distance between the 2 queues. But you could also use it to simply you essentially bring the shutter down on the library when you've reached a certain capacity or occupancy. So that's lane control, and you get a slide on the graphic display. If you have a graphic display, you get a slide that just tells a person that they're not allowed to use that lane. Any hands up on that one? And schedule security, essentially, it's the same as the function we just looked at, turning a lane off, but you simply dictate what time of the week you want that to happen. So this is a screenshot from Juno. Those of you on ISIS, it's very slightly different. You have two different, we have 2 tabs here. We have a template and a schedule tab, and I'll explain the difference. In ISIS, you simply have 2 different functions from the main menu to call up one or the other. So all you're doing here is you're setting up a time of the week in which a lane will either go from card control to closed, or go from closed to time control. And the point of the 2 tabs is that here in the template, if we add an event, if I can click to, yeah, if you add an event, then a pop-up appears and you can set the time and the day for the barrier. In the calendar where a barrier is going to change its state, so for example, if I set something up like this for 10 o'clock on Tuesday, then it will do that today, and it will do that next Tuesday, and it will do that Tuesday after, until you come back into this window and remove it or change it. If I do it in the schedule tab, which I can't show you, I should have a screenshot for it, but I can't show you that. But if you do it in the schedule tab, then it simply applies in the next 7 days. So it applies as a one-off. And the schedule is then a combination of all the things you've got in the template plus anything that you've specifically set up for the next 7 days. it will set a suitable slide on your graphic display to say that the lane is closed. And as shown here in the pop-up, you can apply this to individual barriers. So you can simply start to limit the number of turnstiles that are available, that type of thing. You could use this, for example, to have restricted opening. So you could open from 9 till 5, for example. You could open from 10 till 3, something like that. Or you might want to do the opposite. You might want to close the turnstiles in the middle of the day when you're expecting the library is going to be pretty busy and you don't want more people to come in. It's entirely up to you how you run that. But that's scheduled security. Any hands up on that one?
No.
Is anybody using scheduled security on turnstiles? It was kind of developed for doors as much as anything, and there is a third state you just might have spotted here, which is unlock. It really only applies to doors rather than turnstiles. Is anybody familiar with this and is using it on turnstiles at all? Any hands up? No. Okay. All of these things are in the user guide, of course. If you do want to, if you do want to explore this further, if you do want more information on how to set it up, then by all means contact support or contact your account manager and we can take you further. So the things we've looked at here, maximum occupancy, lane controlling, schedule security, they're all absolute. So they will close a turnstile and you can't get through. The software won't allow anybody through. So the next thing to look at is access rights. So access rights are no good to you if you've set up your lane to be closed. All the things we've looked at already, doesn't matter what your access rights are, you're not going to get through the turnstile. But assuming your turnstile has not been closed, then there's this more targeted approach, which again, some of you were sort of hinting at in the introductions. And what you can do is you can start to identify for each zone. I've got 2 zones here in my example. I've got a main library and an annex zone. And for each of these zones, I can specify what turnstiles are going to be available and at what times of the week they are going to be available, according to the profile of the group of users. And I can have as many of these settings as I like. In terms of the profile of the groups of users, the Sentry member record has 4 category fields that come across from the library management system. So these are category fields that contain information about the profile of the library member. So category 1 is normally used for, or in fact it is used for defining your access rights here. So your category 1 has to represent, if you are thinking of using this to restrict access to certain groups of students, then your category 1 has to contain the relevant information that will allow Sentry to do that. We are able to develop the product to have this work on the other 3 category fields, but it doesn't exist at the moment.
Do you think that would be of interest or useful, opening it up to the other category fields? Anybody?
Oh, okay, I've got Andrew.
Sorry, could you just explain a bit more about the category fields? I understand obviously it's relating to membership data that's obviously coming via the library management system, but I don't quite get when you say there's 4 fields. And I mean, I understand that you can have 4 categories, but could you give us some examples of what that might sort of entail? Particularly, because I know some other colleagues were mentioned earlier, they want to try and prioritise rights for postgraduate researchers, for example.
Yes, so you need to identify a suitable field in your LMS that is going to contain that sort of information. So what type of student, what year they in, what category of student are they, for example. That's the sort of field that you want to find in your LMS. When you've identified that, you can then map that field into category 1 in Sentry. Now, obviously, all of you are all existing Sentry users, and you all already have a link to the category 1 field. So it might need some thinking about if you do want to change. But in any case, you map that field, and you can then start to use this. So in the case of PGR, for example, I'm so tempted to click on some of these pluses and what have you, but it's not going to work in PowerPoint. So in the case of a PGR, you would add a group access rights record where PGR was the value in group name, and you choose your zone. You might only have one zone, so library, and you pop over here and you say, yeah, you can use all the turnstiles for most of the day, for example. And then you start up another one like PGT or something. You set up the zone again, main library, and perhaps you have slightly different times. I guess reduced times, greater times, different days of the week, that sort of thing, for that category of student. And you work your way through the undergrads and every other profile that you have. The example here I've got is a final year student. Maybe the final year students perhaps have better access than the non-final year students, that type of thing. You could also use it to, you could potentially use it to simply adjust the number of hours to which the library is accessible. But you could also use it to specify which times different groups of students are allowed. So, for example, some students might be able to use it on a Monday and others on a Tuesday. I think that was mentioned by someone in the introduction. If you really do need to place restrictions like that, then group access rights would do that for you. And finally, once you've set up all your different settings, there's then a default one. So default has the very specific meaning of everyone else you haven't specified falls into that category. So usually what you find with the default value is that they're either, yeah, you're allowed in all the time, or no, you're not allowed in at all. And everything else has been specified out.
That's interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it also kind of would potentially support another train of thought that's floating about at the moment in terms of the bigger picture of timetabling in relation to students, and the thought that say if you were on a history of art course, all your timetable would be compressed into a much smaller period of time. Instead of having your lectures spread out all week, you'd have them compressed, say, into a day, in order to minimise the time that you're out and about, sort of circulating, using public transport, perhaps, that sort of thing. So say if all your history of art students were in on a particular day, you could then target that into group access rights potentially, and this is this is just one of many ideas which is being floated about at the moment, in order to try and manage overall activity on campus, to try and keep numbers down, rather than having everybody in every single day because they've got one lecture per day or one seminar or whatever. So yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, doesn't it? So you could, those students that are in on a particular day and time for their subjects, you could link that in and say, well, okay, immediately before, immediately afterwards, you've got access rights into the library, and perhaps other people have not. It takes a little bit of doing. So if that's going to be for example, your timetable might change on a weekly basis and be issued out on a Friday or something, then the settings down here to set up the times take a little bit of doing. So ideally you're not doing that every day or every week. There is a copy and paste function, so you can sort of do it for one day and then you can paste it out to all the others. But it does take a bit of doing, so it's nice to sort of set that up and have it run for a period of time.
We had a comment from Samantha on the chat which said yes to other categories.
Yes, to other categories, okay.
And I've got Claudia.
Hiya, I was just exploring one of the options, which is to close in the middle of the day for a clean and then reopen. So within one of the use cases would be you set up your group access to block everybody but staff, and then the cleaning staff could come in. Now in our configuration we have the disabled doors, the swinging doors rather than the turnstiles, which is what our cleaning staff, because they have trolleys and elements, they prefer to use. So we could open that. Now that then would not have a trigger on the counter of occupancy, or will they still, so will this override the counter? That's my question.
So on your swing gate, if they go in on a card, identify themselves on a card, then that will count them in terms of occupancy. If they go in on a push button, if someone lets them in, then on a pass gate, on a swing gate, then it usually does not count as occupancy, because we usually don't get feedback to say that someone's actually gone through. So it works very differently to a turnstile. Does that
right? So that center one would not count as occupancy, right? Even though they do let themselves in, like they have to be authenticated.
If they were buzzed through by a member of staff with a button on the desk, then it would not count as occupancy. It wouldn't record the event at all. If they let themselves in with a card, because I know you've got a card reader on that.
We do, because not everybody can use those swing gates.
Yes.
It's only the priority for the students, and we've opened it up to or for the patrons that have disability bikes or the cleaning staff. So it would be a combination of these. Of the main element that I imagine most of us are trying to deal with is limit the number of staff in a counter duty. Yeah, so we don't want to have them exposed to the counter as sitting there waiting for the cleaning to come in. So everything to be self-service as much as possible. So what we would say then, we need to trigger the counter to allow them to self-serve, not just through these access rights. Because if the occupancy for patrons is reached, then the cleaning staff will not be able to self-serve.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That's clear.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Samantha.
Thanks, Daisy. I just thought I'd talk a bit more about what Barney was talking about the categories being open up. We never dreamt that we'd be in the situation that we would need to use them. And we're doing the phased opening. So we want to restrict it down to like postgrad research and academics preparing for teaching. And however, we have put that data from our LMS into category 2. Our category 1 is around kind of programs. So it's too vast to kind of narrow down what we're looking for. So we would really welcome if we could choose which category to use.
Yeah, I understand. That makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. Thanks for explaining that.
Okay, carry on.
So that brings to an end all the functions that exist within Sentry that might assist with restricted opening. It's just to mention a couple of other things. So we have display messages. So you don't all have graphic displays, but many of you do have the graphic displays on your barriers. So we can use those to send messages to students. Now, there's a default set of slides that we have, of course, for use. and this is the default sort of standby slide where we're waiting for someone to, oh no, it's not, I do apologize. This is the slide once someone has presented a card and they've been approved and the lane is open, ready for them to go through. So you can change any of these slides. You can, they're all JPEGs. You have to bear in mind the size, the pixel size, and the naming convention that exists within the SD card. But you can change any of those JPEGs yourself to add information, specific information about what you're trying to achieve, and why perhaps it's slower than it might otherwise be, that type of thing. That's always an option to you. And if you don't want to mess around with the JPEGs and changing the SD card inside the display, then simpler still is a scrolling message in Sentry itself. So you just set that up through the software, and the default slide, the slide that basically is awaiting for a card, has that scrolling message shown down at the bottom of the screen. So that could be very useful. It could be opening hours or something like that on the slide. So do make use of your display messages if you do reopen, and also make use of Sentry reports. So they'll help you, of course, identify what your occupancy is, what your footfall is at different times. So perhaps on an hourly basis, for example, they'll identify how many people have come into your facility. So do make use of those. You can identify whether they are within the parameters that you're looking for. You can use them to identify whether any changes you've made, the sort of changes we've been discussing this morning, have actually been successful and have got those figures under control. And you can use that to feed back into your access control policy, perhaps make further changes. Any hands up?
Andrew?
Thanks. Just in relation to the display messages and some of the other things, actually, just wanted to make sure that those things are all available on ISIS, are they? They're not just unique to Juno.
Yeah, exactly that, Andrew. Yeah.
I'm going to sort of hand you back to Annie. We're done with existing functionality, unless there's any other questions.
Okay, so yeah, we'll move on to this. Really is sort of tips, ideas, and well, as we say, tips and ideas and thoughts for reopening, kind of not directly necessarily related to Sentry and the access control, but also includes some thoughts on self-service kiosks, book returns, temporary card kiosks, and that sort of thing. So some bullet points here. So one tip really is, so any system changes that you do make, it's certainly worth making a note of the system changes. At some point we do anticipate we'll be returning to normal or some sort of resemblance of normal. So at some point you're going to want to return your system presumably back to the tried and tested methods that you've got already. So it's worth making a note of any changes that you have made, so you can easily go back and change them back when you need to. Guidelines and training for staff. So obviously changes that you're making at a policy level, pretty clear, but just make sure your staff are aware and they've had the sufficient training or the required training to enable them to enact the changes that you've made and the changes in policy and the decisions that have been made, so they can assist with the opening and the changes there. And then communicate the changes to your visitors and your students and your patrons. So, I mean, as Kevin said, you can use the graphics displays for that, but also, you know, other signage and your media channels. This will help with maintaining the occupancy levels. So if people are aware that there's limited occupancy or the changes to it, then hopefully it'll reduce people turning up at the library and having queues form there as people only find out about them when they turn up. This may be up for discussion, but we'd perhaps recommend introducing the changes to all your library locations at the same time, just to ease clarity and sort of try and reduce confusion. So if you've got multiple libraries and multiple branches, as I say, you might feel differently, but we would say try and introduce the changes to all the locations at the same time, so people will know, particularly if they use the multiple libraries, then they'll at least know that there's consistency between them all. And then, as I say, so kind of moving away a bit from Sentry, but so promoting the use of self-service stations, so for you, so your self-service kiosks or your laptop loans, that sort of thing, rather than staff interaction. So that'll help maintain social distancing. And in a similar vein, so soon there will, for our self-service kiosks, there will be a touch-free user interface option that can be configured. So at the moment, they're all touch screen, and users have the option to select, whether it's check-in, check-out, or what function they want to use for the self-check stations. But this new user interface will be much more streamlined, and it will be a case of present the card without touching the screen, and then put their items on the reader. And then when the items are removed from the reader, at that point the checkout will take place, and those items will be on the account, and then the session will end. So there'll be no need for a student to touch the screen. As I say, that's in development and will be available soon. So we're obviously free of charge, and our support guys will be in touch with the self-service customers to roll that out. And then cleaning advice, particularly with a view to touch screens, but also for our turnstiles and other hardware that people will come into contact with. We are preparing a concise document that will give all this cleaning advice on there, and explain how to carry out the cleaning safely and without risk of damaging or causing problems to any of the hardware. Yeah, so that's kind of the end of those bullet points. Has anybody got any questions or any comments on this?
Hi, Barney.
Daisy, you're muted.
Sorry,
That's all right.
Ryan, we've got this question.
Hiya. I just wanted to ask about the touch-free user interface. So do you need a dedicated kiosk for check-in and another one for check-out?
We're not 100% quite how we'll handle that sort of situation. Obviously, at the moment, if you're using it for check-in and check-out, so as I say, it's still in development at the moment, and more detail will become available on that. So, but it might be that you need to dedicate it to either check-in or check-out. But as I say, that's not 100% confirmed yet.
Thanks.
Samantha?
I was just interested if anyone else was thinking about changing their self-check setup. So what I'm thinking of is to reduce the usage of it, maybe take off the return when they can only check out only, and therefore there's no intervention for the student with return. They just leave them in a dedicated area. I just wonder if anyone else was thinking around those lines.
They could drop them in a box, couldn't they, when they're returning?
Yeah,
I was thinking that on Narayan's. Narayan's obviously Narayan's got the one kiosk from us. So if you are limited on having that as issue or return only, then have that as issue, and return can be a box. It can be a smart bin, so you could have a reader in the bin. So they just drop them in there, and that automatically checks them out of their account.
Yeah,
so that's an option.
Good idea.
So we'll have to come back and advise, I think, on exactly how that's going to work.
We were thinking of quarantining the books for 72 hours anyway when they return. So maybe people just put them in a room and then walk away, and then 72 hours later we check them in manually. Yeah, and as Kevin said, with our smart bin option, there's actually a setting to so you can automate knowing which bin. So, if you need a few smart bins, but you can very easily then automate
the 72-hour or 24-hour or whatever quarantine period that you set.
Yeah, good idea.
Tom?
Oh yeah, thanks Daisy. I was just going to say, of course, a lot of us will have non-Telepen self-checks. So I would encourage people, as I will be, if you've got a particular configuration that you find works and you kind of know the steps you followed, then we can use like JISC mail lists like LIS Biblioteca and other ones to share like configuration tips. Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
No one else with their hand up at the moment.
Okay, so I think, Kevin, is this now back to... Oh no, this is still me, isn't it? Yeah.
This is still you, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Sorry, everyone has to listen to me for a bit longer. So, yeah, existing possible additions. So this is to really just a very brief look at some additional products and modules that are available right now and may assist in your particular situation for this unusual time. So as Kevin talked about, we've got maximum occupancy as a setting available, and we can further extend that into other zones. So if you wanted to know particular internal occupancy levels of particular areas within your library, we can add IR sensors to those particular areas. So, you know, for instance, if you've got a post-grad area or anything really where you know that area it needs to be limited to a certain amount, we can add a sensor, and then you'll have further maximum occupancy or zonal occupancy layers available within Sentry to set that. And then Vantage infographics enables you to advertise via your website exactly the occupancy levels of your library or your zones. So that may be of use to, as I say, your students can then look on the website and see very quickly how busy the library is before they decide to go. Juno Buddy is our smartphone application that students can use instead of their card to gain access, and you've got the option to use that for in a similar way to our day ticket kiosk. So students can use it for a certain period of time. As I say, that's a smartphone application that students can download. And then the Patron mobile checkout. This is again another smartphone application, and enables students to use their smartphone to check items out onto their account. So again, removing the need to have contact with self-check or with staff. So back to Vantage or onto Vantage. This is essentially the sort of thing that you could display on your web page. So you can see that we've got a total figure there for the total library occupancy, and then in our university library, you can see we've got 3 floors, and that's the individual occupancy levels there. So you can very easily advertise that to your students and visitors, but also it means you've got control over the occupancy levels on each level as well, in each area. And then Juno Buddy, as I say, it displays an electronic barcode on the smartphone screen. And you can set the parameters for when a student can use it to enter the library, amongst some other features as well that are in there. And then the Patron mobile checkout. So as I say, this is a smartphone application. Students can use it to view their account information and also to borrow items. So it works with any Android or iOS iPhone. Actually uses the smartphone camera to read the barcode within the book, so it's not using RFID for the to read the RFID tag. It's using the barcode, and then it does something clever, so it maintains the RFID security. So we have to have control over your security gauge, but then we know that the item's been checked out via the phone, and it won't alarm on exit. You can't use this app for returning books for obvious reasons. People will then be able to return their items when they're sat at home or whatever without actually returning. So this is for checkout only. But then students can return their items using your normal returns solutions anyway. So just a few more screens there showing that. So as I say, you can borrow your items and you can view your account information. The application is downloaded by your new normal App Store or Play Store, and it would be branded and customised to suit your individual institutions.
We've got a comment on the group chat regarding Telepen's support. So are we available for support in the usual way? In the event of a hardware failure, then with travel restrictions in place at the moment, how are we to fix things? Sort of an official statement is being requested. Might be something we need to sort of look into, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll certainly follow up with an official statement on that, and yeah, we'll release that following this.
But a question from Andrew.
Yeah. So on the Patron mobile checkout, does that only work with your self-service systems, or can that work?
So it can be run in parallel with other vendors' self-service. However, we do need to have control over the exit security gates. So the RFID book security gates, we need to have control so we can, our system needs to know which item has been checked out using the Patron mobile checkout, so then it doesn't alarm the gates, because it doesn't actually deactivate the security in the tag. It creates a whitelist of these items that have been checked out. And so the security needs to refer back.
Oh, right. So how does the RFID get switched off then when it's booked out? Is that at the point of going through the turnstile then?
No. So it's when somebody checks an item out using the app, the item is actually added to and is actually added to a whitelist that we store as a cache. And then when somebody exits through the gates, the RFID gates read the tag and then check that against the whitelist. If the item's not on the whitelist, it will alarm as normal. If it's on the whitelist, then it doesn't. So that's why we need to have the control over those gates. Yeah,
and on Vantage and Zonal, forgive me if I wasn't paying full attention, but how does that work out the occupancy on different floors? Sorry.
So essentially, you'd need to have a sensor at each entry or exit point on that floor. And then it's a bi-directional IR sensor, so we can configure the sensor to work out via IR body temperature how many people have passed through the threshold, and so it knows how many people have entered the floor and then exited the floor via that exit. And then in the same way as your other zones, you set a maximum occupancy for that individual zone, and then as people enter or exit via that sensor or that entry and exit, the occupancy is calculated accordingly.
Okay, thanks for that. Interesting. Thank you.
We have a couple of comments on the chat regarding a special COVID-19 pricing for the Juno Buddy and the Patron mobile checkout.
Absolutely, yeah. We're certainly looking at what we can do to assist in this sort of unprecedented time. So we'll certainly be looking at that. And if you've got any particular interest in either of those two, please do be in touch with your account manager, and we'll be certainly pleased to advise and discuss that.
I think we were talking this morning about it, weren't we? And I think there's definitely something planned. It will be on a time-limited basis. So if you want to continue using it in sort of, well, once we're back to some sort of normal, then a charge will then apply, or the rest of the charge would then apply. So we'll get you details.
Question from Kenneth: are APIs available?
Sorry, could you repeat, Daisy?
A question from Kenneth Anderson: are APIs available?
Yeah, so certainly for the Patron mobile checkout, an API is available, so you can write it into your own application. At this stage, it does require you to handle the SIP2 checkout section at the moment. So there's a little bit of development work to be done there, but yeah, an API is available for that, and we can advise more details of that. I'm not sure, but Kevin, can you advise about Juno Buddy? I can't remember, or Pascalis. What was the?
Well, Juno Buddy is is working through an API, and we can provide the API separately as well.
That's it for the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. So Kevin, I think back over to you for this section.
Right. Just going to take control again. So this section is possible developments that we could implement. Happy to hear thoughts from anybody on this, if anyone's got any ideas on further development. But we've got a couple also to suggest. Be interested to get your thoughts on the two of them. So first of all, we could perhaps limit throughput through the barriers on some basis. We've looked already today at what exists in Sentry in terms of reaching a maximum occupancy, bringing shutters down, that type of thing. But this really is to do with just slowing down the actual throughput of the system. Having spent the last 30 years trying to develop systems that are fast and responsive for you, we're trying to develop a system which is sluggish and slow. So we could, for example, just put a delay in between any two successive entries. We could have perhaps a delay on perhaps over a longer period of time. So we could perhaps restrict the number of entries to a certain quantity per hour, that type of thing. We could possibly link that to access rights. So we spoke about different priorities for different groups of library users earlier. So maybe some groups of users would have a better priority than other within the bounds of putting in some sort of delay or restriction. And perhaps we link it to occupancy, so we don't slow down immediately when there's very few people in the library, but we start to slow the system down as capacity increases. So there are lots of different ways of doing this. We don't necessarily need to agree on one today by any means, but is that type of thing of any sort of interest to you? Do you think that might be relevant to any strategies for opening? Any hands up, Daisy?
No.
No. Okay. So we'll take that as perhaps not so much interest in that then. Perhaps we've got things covered by the other things that Sentry can do. Basically, if that is of some appeal, or if that's of some appeal later, then do get back in touch with us and we can look at what we might be able to do with Sentry. The other thought we had was linking entry to the library with a booking system, a room booking system or study space booking system. So we can restrict the volume of people coming in by simply making sure they book in advance. And obviously there'll be a limit to the number of people that can book in any one session, whatever a session means. We'll be able perhaps to apply restrictions per person, so that a person could only visit the library so many times a week or so many times a month, in order to share that access to the resource out. It's possibly the only way, it's the only thing we've discussed, I think, this morning, where this might give us a way of fairly sharing access out to everybody. It would link in with the room booking system, obviously. So the room booking system is already developed, but it's not appropriate for access to the library, because as soon as one person makes that booking, then nobody else can get in at the moment. So we have to make some changes, but at least the booking functionality already exists. So we're a long way to having something potentially ready. And obviously it will apply to different settings to different profiles of students, much like the access rights on access control. Thought that might be a little bit going a little bit too far, but that's possibly not for Telepen to decide. It's worth sort of putting that as a point out to you, and and seeing if there is any interest in that. Any hands up, Daisy, on that one?
We don't, but we have a comment which suggests that it's in pre-booking library entry sounds interesting.
Right. Okay. Okay. Just the one comment at the moment.
A couple coming through just saying it sounds interesting. So.
Okay, so what we might potentially do with that is continue a bit of dialogue, perhaps by email or something like that, and just see if we can take that one forward any further over the coming days and weeks.
Just to go back to a question that came in just before that session, the barcode readers in the apps, do they support Coda Bar?
Is in which apps? That'll be in the Patron mobile checkout app.
Buddy, yeah.
Well, Juno Buddy displays the barcode, so it'll be Patron mobile checkout.
Yeah. We'd have to
find out. We will find out
to be safe.
Yeah, I haven't got a Coda Bar barcode handy here in my home, so we're going to have to find that one out. So while we're on this slide, does anybody else have any thoughts about what they would like Sentry to be able to do that, but perhaps think that it doesn't do at the moment in connection with obviously restricted opening and that type of thing?
Nothing at the moment, no, guys. I think if anybody obviously comes up with anything, they could certainly email us and we could further discuss if needed, couldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You've also got all our contact details. We can continue any of these conversations. To that end, does anybody want to discuss anything further? Yeah, we've got a note about category 2 or category 3 or 4 being used for access rights. So we'll report back on that.
I think that's it, guys.
Yeah, I think it is. Barney, do you want to? Would you like to close?
Yeah, so well, thank you all very much for joining us and for participating, all your contributions. Hopefully you found it all useful. As I say, we'll share the PowerPoint slides with you, and if there's anything in there that you need either further information on or assistance with making any changes, then please do get in touch either with myself, Kevin, or the support guys. And we'll be sure to get back to you and assist you with all of that. And then the next step here, so we'll be shortly releasing or sending invitations out to our next webinar, which is all around space management. So similar sort of topics, but particularly focusing on Vantage, which I mentioned in this discussion. We'll go into detail there, and also study space booking. So as I say, look out for the invitations and we'll see you then. But in the meantime, thank you very much, and everybody keep well, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Barney or Kevin, Kenneth had a quick question about Vantage and wanted to know who to contact. I don't know.
Kenneth, that'd be me. Yep.
And
yeah,
about
following that up with you.
Sorry, pricing on Juno Buddy and the Patron mobile checkout. Do I email Kevin, you, or Barney?
You can email me, Narayan, but I'm making a note as well, so hopefully I can get that information to you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Pleasure.